Thanks, Anne. Thanks, John. Look, the reality is that I generally accept these invitations to speak at conferences because I notoriously lose watches, and thankfully Ian's given me his, so I'll be right again for another year or two. So thanks. Very nice. Goals. Looks good. So anyway, so it's always handy when you're speaking at conferences to make sure that you leave some flexibility in your presentation just to make sure you can accommodate the previous speaker. So, John, I've actually got supplier meetings this week and next week, and if you could come with me to tell my suppliers that in 2017 their price will be 36 cents, that would be really helpful. Because I'm not sure how many farmers we have in the room, but I'm sure the speakers who are unfortunately absent from trying to save their drowning cows, they might just leave them. I think the reality is that if we were delivering that message as an industry, although it is based on fact, I can tell this room that there would be enormous pushback. There would be enormous pushback from farmers that were saying, we are only just there now. We are only just starting to literally get our head above water. And if the way we look in the next few years is further down pricing, we will find that extraordinarily challenging. So for an industry leader, the challenge in Australian agriculture has become different to what it was a number of years ago. The fact is that those statistics deliver us one key message. If Australian agriculture remains only in commodity, it will continue to struggle to find its place in world agricultural trade, and it will continue to diminish. So the challenge is to move the business out of commodity and into higher end, higher value. And that's what I think most dairy industry leaders would be saying to you if they were standing here today. The interesting thing is that we do have a whole series of conflicting circumstances and statistics. I mean, one of them would be quite simply that global dairy pricing following the global financial crisis in 8-9, recovered amazingly quickly, and in US dollar terms looks very, very good. Indeed, looks almost as good as it did in those years that we would have described as a boom, that were returning 50 cents a litre in farm gate price to farmers. But of course, what's offset that is the strength of the Australian dollar. So what we've got to do as an industry, and indeed as individual companies, is find a way to deal with what becomes a moving target around demand and other factors globally. Because the fact is that we have been hearing for years that demand will outstrip supply, that quite frankly Australian agriculture is beautifully positioned on the doorstep of Asia to feed that particular marketplace and respond to the changing dynamics of that marketplace. And that fact is correct. And I'll show you some statistics in a little while that support that from our business's perspective. There is a danger in all things that you can consistently see the analysts saying demand outstrips supply. And therefore, you just go back to Economics 101 and you say, well, if demand outstrips supply, I'm about to make out like a bandit and it's only a matter of time. But we haven't seen that manifest itself in Australian agriculture. We see it manifest itself in something like mining. The reason why I've got that slide up there is that fundamentally, it is why vision statements are important. Because you can sit there and say, well, demand will outstrip supply, and what I'll do is I'll ride with the industry. I'll go forward with the rest of the industry. The great challenge for all business is to actually perform when the rest of your industry isn't performing. I'm conscious that this is agriculture and resource, and I wouldn't want to say, look, anybody with a shovel makes money these days. That would be far too simplistic. But there is an element of truth to it. That is not the element of that truth does not transfer to dairy or indeed agriculture, I don't believe. The reason why it doesn't is, quite frankly, we are not big enough in the marketplace. The marketplace won't allow us to actually enjoy the fact that demand outstrips it. There are too many other moving parts, and what we have long had to do and will long need to do into the future is position ourselves to meet the requirements of the market. The fact is that our competitors will not make it easy for us, and our competitors are global. They are the EU, they are the US, they are the emerging South American countries, and they are, of course, our good friends across the Tasman, New Zealand. We have to find our position in the global supply chain as a dairy industry. We cannot be a solution to its requirements. Globally, what we have to be is a service provider or a supplier that finds the niche that guarantees the return and the growth of the industry in this market. I am a great believer in the value of competition. I'll talk a little bit more about it later in the context of the domestic market. But the reality is, as John mentioned, you do hear a lot of media around, well, it's all Australian dairy farming returns are suppressed because of the dollar down milk issue, or indeed it's because of the currency. It is because of the two-speed economy. It's because there is subsidy or there is trade barriers. It doesn't actually matter, to be truthful. It doesn't actually matter. What matters is the ability to respond and change to the competitive circumstance that you find yourself in. For as long as I have been involved in this industry, I have been told about the rules. I've been told about the rules by much larger companies that told me that they were going to take me over. I've been told about the rules by very large customers that have told me that I belong in this particular sector. Or indeed, I've read about the rules from Brussels and the EU, or indeed the US as they put on export enhancement schemes. Again, interesting, they make interesting reading, but if you obsess about those factors, you will forget about what really matters. And that is the customer. No matter where they are in the world, the only rule that matters is that you need to be able to respond to whatever demand and whatever requirement that customer might deliver to you. And it doesn't just mean in product. You need to be able to meet the expectation of your customer. So when we talk about the Australian marketplace, I guess I want to put it to you in my terms. There is a lot of discussion about the power of the big two supermarkets. There is a lot of concern about what that might mean. There is indeed a lot of discussion about the fact that I think we've had innumerable Senate inquiries. We'll have innumerable more. We'll have any number of ACCC inquiries or whatever else it might be. Interestingly, the people that know the facts state them pretty regularly. The truth is that agricultural products, and particularly dairy, and including dairy, prices are set by the global marketplace. They are set by the global marketplace, and they ultimately flow through. They ultimately flow through to whatever is occurring in the domestic market, because that's what competition causes to happen. Because if there is a major premium in the Australian domestic market, guess what? Companies chase it. And they discount against the other company, and they offer an alternative, and they see if they can win that share. And guess what that delivers? It actually delivers a cheaper product to consumers. I always find it interesting when people ask the ACCC to investigate cheaper products to consumers. They actually think that, one of the letters in ACCC is consumer, consumer. And the reality is that what we've seen happen is competition has delivered cheaper products to consumers. What it's done to companies has been extraordinarily difficult sometimes and extraordinarily painful. But sometimes I find in the heat of battle and in the heat of the most intense competition, it's just better to sing, you know. And one of the songs that often comes to mind when I'm thinking about the Australian consumer market, the challenge of meeting and making margin with very large single type customers, is I think of New York, of course. You know, because I don't plan to sing here, but I think the line from New York was, if I can make it here, I can make it anywhere. And that is the truth. That is the truth of why we find a niche, or why there is a niche to be had in the world marketplace for Australian dairy companies. There is a niche to be had because we are very used to competition. We are very used to running very tight supply chains. We're used to having to convince the customer that we have something unique, something innovative that is not available elsewhere. So really, the disciplines around inventory management, about procurement protocols, around supply chain management, around all those things are hard taught and hard won in the Australian marketplace, and you don't forget them easily. And of course, that's a great advantage as you think long term about how you will meet your customers' requirements around the world.